Hey guys,
Okay.
Dave from Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Monte Cook. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. So tech issues aside, so what did you want to come and talk to us about today? You got some stuff going on, I hear.
I am working hard on the finishing touches of Invisible Sun.
Okay. So how far out are we on that?
Well, we're looking at the beginning of next year is when it comes out. Because I know it sounds crazy to be talking in August about putting the finishing touches on something that doesn't come out until then. But there's just so many pieces in this giant box that it comes in and everything, and it's all going to be assembled. And there's just a lot to it.
So I guess in case someone hasn't heard about Invisible Sun, they don't know what it is. Let's start there. I know we had you on quite some time ago when the Kickstarter was actually going on.
Right. So that would have been about a year ago. And so Invisible Sun is a new role-playing game. It's, I call it a surreal role-playing game. It's sort of based on a lot of the concepts behind surrealism, which means that it's weird, but it also means that it's full of magic and wild imagery and sort of things that would be impossible in other settings. It's also an attempt at doing some new things with a tabletop RPG. We have incorporated in, for example, a whole mode of play where you play sort of in between sessions. And so, you can just sit with, like if you're the game master, you can sit with one of the players. You can do it via text. You can sit down at a coffee shop. You can do whatever and just play out really simply, one little side scene that happens in between sessions or something like that. That takes care of a lot of the stuff that normally, if you're playing at a normal game with a normal group around the table, like if somebody wants to go off and do something by themselves, you sort of discourage that, right? Because then everyone else just has to sit there and wait. But so this kind of fixes that problem a little bit. I really have tried to take the way that people actually play role-playing games and have tried to work that into the game so that you're not fighting against the game is working with you.
So we're probably, kind of similar in age. You might be a little bit older because I remember, when I was playing third edition, Monte Cook, was on everything. Sean K. Reynolds, Todd Lockwood, all you guys, and remember looking up to you guys. And I bring that up because when we played games back then, it was much different than today. Now, just like we're doing this, we're on Zoom and we're talking to each other and we're literally on opposite ends of the country. People are gaming that way now too. We're so much more connected through technology, whether it's text messaging, like you said, or a messenger app or something else. So when you develop the in-between session, that idea, was that taking into account how much more connected people are now today, and the idea of let's take this away from the table so we don't have 5 people sitting around while 2 people play the game?
Right. So yeah, it was a combination of that, right? We just have a lot more ways to communicate now, right? We have a lot more ways to connect. And so let's take advantage of that is part of it. And the other part of it is that the thing that I have heard as a professional game designer over and over and over again is, I'd love to play this game, but I just don't have time. I can't, my group can only get together once a month, right? If that, and I wanted to address that, right? I mean, we're all busy. We've got, gamers in general are kind of aging right now. Some of us have kids, or some of us have, older kids, right? Going off to high school and college. Some of us, we all have, jobs or school or whatever, right? That is really keeping us busy. And so on the one hand, while Invisible Sun enables kind of this long distance communication, embraces things like texts and however you want to talk to each other, at the same time, it sort of celebrates that moment when you can actually all get together and makes the tabletop experience hopefully something really, really special with lots of cool components and, lots of really useful components in the game that make it really easy. Lots of reference sheets. All the spells are on cards. Things like that just make it really easy. There's not a lot of book flipping in this game.
What about integrating technology into gaming?
Well, so one of the things that we are working on, and this was part of the Kickstarter too, is an app specifically for Invisible Sun, specifically to kind of, you can communicate however you want, right? If you want to just use your phone and send a text message, that's fine. But you'll also be able to use this app, and the game master will be able to send information to the players via this app. The players will be able to respond. One of the big things in Invisible Sun is that in addition to dice, there's also a set of cards, which is kind of like a tarot deck a little bit. And these cards, like if the game master sends you a card, the card has meaning. And you'll be able to send players cards through the app and show them, oh, I got the, misunderstood beast, and that means this. I think, I want to embrace that in as many ways as possible. I will say that this isn't a game intended to be played. Well, you can do whatever you want, obviously, but there is meant to be sort of an in-person tabletop component to this game. I can imagine designing a game that's built entirely on playing. We're talking via Zoom right now, right? But there's Skype and there's, Roll20 and all these things. That seems like an interesting design challenge too. That isn't the challenge that I put forth with Invisible Sun, though. Invisible Sun assumes that tabletop experience. In fact, what I kind of wanted was, I don't know if you're a board game player, but, if you get one of those fantastic board games, Fantasy Flight's really good at this, right? And you open that thing up and there's just all this cool stuff and you're taking stuff out and you're just like, oh, I can't believe how cool this is. I wanted that experience for a role-playing game, right? I wanted that, I'm holding all this stuff in my hand. I'm just looking at these cool things while I'm playing the game. I wanted that for a role-playing game.
It feels like on Invisible Sun, got a little greedy. You're like, I want all the cool stuff from the board game and the role-playing game, and we're going to throw some tech in there. And I have a confession. I was pretty sure there was an app, but it was a long time ago that I backed the Kickstarter, so it's like I had to do a data dump at some point.
I understand. It's been a while.
But yeah, that's really cool. And the idea is, like you said, is what I gather is it's not to replace at the table play, but to extend play.
Yes, exactly, right? Because for those groups that can only get together once a month, normally that means, well, I only get to enjoy an RPG once a month then. But this enables you to figure out ways to have some, small doses of RPG fun in between those times.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get that, because we play several games where we do that, where even if we game multiple times a month, we're playing different games and different people are running them. So by the time you get back to that other game, it's like, what happened? And, even using like a Facebook Messenger or something like that can quickly bog down and you lose your place. So I'm curious to see what you guys do with an app. The idea of actually sending, digital goodies like the cards is really cool. That's going to keep people in. And so like the app, is it going to be able to where you can have the group in the app so the GM can talk to the group or talk to individuals in the group?
That's the plan. Yep. Once we start talking about, oh, go ahead.
Or is it all kind of still in the works?
It is all still in the works. And to be honest, I drew up a brief for how I think the app should work and whatnot quite a while ago. And then I've been working on the tabletop part. I'm not an app guy. I'm not a technical guy. And so I kind of have given that to other people to work on, which is great because I don't know what I'm doing. And that way, but so I can only tell you how I want it to work. I can't tell you what's happening with it or what stage it's at or anything like that.
Okay. Sometimes it's better that way anyway. let the tech monkeys do their thing, and hopefully it comes back the way we want it. But that's great. And it's interesting too that like you're moving in this direction. I don't think I've seen anybody else move in this direction quite yet. The first thing that I noticed was actually with Cypher System, and in the core book, where it's only like one sentence, but I found it kind of profound, is when you talk about virtual tabletops or gaming online, and it references like a turn order or something, and it references playing online, and that might be the first time it's actually been published in a tabletop role-playing game.
I don't know. I didn't think about that, but I know what you're talking about. I think it's where the game master just has people go how, left or right, how he sees their screen, right?
Yeah.
How he sees their picture on the screen. It's because I play that way a lot myself, right? We do, my company is spread out between Seattle and Kansas City and Chicago now, and we do a lot of online gaming, a lot of gaming via Skype or Zoom or whatever it is, and I'm used to my players just being little squares on my screen.
Well, to me, it's such a small thing, but it's like profound in the sense that like this is where the hobby's going. Having come from a place where when I started, like I would get my books at like a Borders. I don't even think they exist anymore. I don't even know, or a Walden Books.
Right.
If there was game stores, they weren't in the vicinity of anywhere where I lived. So that wasn't even a thing. It was like you find a group of friends or like someone's older brother or something and introduces you to gaming. And then I've got to watch the whole progression. And now we have this whole online gaming thing. And even more so since the last time I spoke with you, not only do we have online gaming, but we have online gaming as entertainment. So
right.
It's really shifted and things have changed.
Yeah, I have very similar experience to you. I think I'd probably been gaming for at least maybe 4 or 5 years before I ever even stepped foot into a game store. I bought my first D&D books at a B. Dalton bookseller, and they've been gone for a long time. It's come so far. We've done a little of the sort of Twitch, watch us run a game kind of thing. I don't know. That's a weird space for me. It's not actually something that I enjoy doing too much as it's fun to watch people play games for a little while. But I'd rather play the game myself. So I don't do a lot of it. So when you have that point of view, it's hard to get into the mindset of doing that for other people, but it's something that people ask us to do a lot, and we're probably going to try to figure out ways to do more.
Well, here's the thing. I have a little bit of insight into this just because of what we've been doing for this is our 4th year. And, the idea at first was we're pretty much, we just talk about gaming, and it's kind of the conversations we've always been having, but we, record them and put them on YouTube now. Now, most of us, we don't actually really enjoy watching gameplays the same as you. It's like, okay, it's fun for a little bit, by a while, but then it's kind of like it can get boring or it's just not our thing, right? But what we've realized is other people do. So we record our games and put them up and let them watch them. And then there's that is the barest essence of that. And that's a lot of what we've done is this is our in-person group. We just turn on a camera and we kind of do what we do. And we don't really change a whole lot, and then we've kind of moved into, now we're kind of doing some games where we stream them online and we try to be cognizant of people are watching this and there's a chat and there might be some interaction to now we just recently started a collab game with a bunch of different creators, and it is really about, this is, we're creating entertainment as well as, playing the game. Now, I enjoy all those aspects of playing the game and at whatever level we record it and put it out there, but I personally enjoy shorter form content than the longer content, like many people. But again, look, obviously, like we might even be in the minority, because if you look at Critical Role, they'll get like, they get, tens of thousands of people watching them play live. So
yeah,
it creates this interesting space.
Well, and I'll be honest, I think it's a fantastic thing, because I keep hearing over and over again, people watch things like Critical Role and then they go out and buy some D&D books and start playing. It encourages people to play, and I think it also sort of demystifies what an RPG is, right? I mean, not that anyone is actually sitting down and playing a game in the same way that they're playing it in Critical Role at home around the kitchen table, but it's still, it suddenly seems less weird, right, to those people who are just like, I don't get this whole RPG thing.
Well, they glamorize it a little bit, right? And like, I know there's people that don't like that, and they kind of rail against it, but it helps the hobby overall. I hear the things, oh, well, they're just trying to get ahead in career X, so they do the thing, they're doing this thing. But I'm like, does it really matter how they pick up their first D20 and start playing role-playing games? Like, yeah, sure, it's not going to stick for some of them, right? That's true. But some of them it will, and, great. We got more people in the hobby.
I agree. I think it's going to do great things for bringing new people in, for sure.
But I'll circle back to Invisible Sun. So you guys have been reaching out to people now and wanting to talk about Invisible Sun. So is there a significance to the time, like right now?
I think it's pre-orders just opened up, for one thing.
Okay.
So there's a very sort of practical reason why we want to be talking about Invisible Sun again. I mean, I've been doing a monthly website column for Design Diaries about Invisible Sun that people can go to montecookgames.com and look back at them. But other than that, we haven't really been talking about it too much because, well, first of all, my head's been down working on it really hard for like the last year. But the other thing is, it didn't really do it. Once the Kickstarter's over, there's only so much benefit that we can get about, trying to really get people excited about it. But now the pre-orders are open, and we can, we're looking at a Gen Con now here in a week, where we're going to not only be taking pre-orders, but we're going to be selling the Sooth deck, which is the thing that I was talking about, the tarot-like deck. They're really cool, beautiful round cards. And so that'll all be at Gen Con. And then, I guess, in a way, another very practical reason why we're talking about it now is I feel like I'm coming up for air finally. Like I said, we're just putting the finishing touches on things from the design point of view. There's still lots of, proofing and editing and assembly of the various parts and stuff.
Well, that's really important too, and I'm glad I asked, because to interject, I'll put the links in the description so people can go check it out and pre-order.
Yeah, please do. We've got some really good deals regarding that, and some of the stuff that was available on the Kickstarter, some of the special stuff that was available on the Kickstarter is available as a pre-order, so it's kind of fun.
And you guys have really, really good customer service over there too.
Thank you. Our customer service person is Tammy Ryan, and she's fantastic.
And I bring that up because I actually had some problems with products. And when things work smoothly, you don't really understand what kind of customer service a company has. It's not until you actually encounter problems, and that you have to deal with someone and get things straightened out. And the customer service person I was dealing with was fantastic, took care of everything. So I was very happy. And I would just like you to know, as the owner of the company, that I had a really good experience.
I'm glad. It's funny to talk about that because, Tammy was, so I started this company with Shauna Germain, and, for quite a while it was just the two of us, but Tammy was our first employee. And I always think it's sort of significant that our customer service person was the first person that we hired. Like, that would not have been what I expected, but I think that's because of Kickstarter, because we have a very active online store. We're doing a lot of shipping ourselves. It just makes sense, but it's not what I would have predicted. It's not even what would have been true 10 years ago. right? Your first employee would not have been a customer service person 10 years ago for sure.
Well, it shows that you learned something from, all your previous experiences, because I'm not surprised at all, because once you start selling stuff, you're going to start getting a lot of emails, whether something's right or something's wrong, or they want someone to talk to. Well, if you and Shanna are doing that, guess what you're not doing? You're not doing your job.
Exactly. Yeah. So Tammy's great. She's got a lot of experience. She really knows her stuff.
Awesome. Also, I'll put links to the design journals too. I'll start sifting through and get everything that I think will be important for people and they want to know. So if this is someone's first exposure to Invisible Sun, mechanically, what can they expect? I know one of the cool things you would kind of integrate into the game we talked about in our last conversation was the fact that sometimes players just can't make it to the game, and you kind of built that into the system and took that into account.
I did. So the idea is that all the player characters, they start out as people in sort of what we think of as the real world. But we all realized that this was all not actual reality, that this was what's called shadow, and that we were actually powerful wizards. We don't call them wizards in Invisible Sun. Actually have their own special term called Vizsla. We are all Vizsla, and we had come here kind of to flee this great war, and because sort of the lie of shadow is so compelling, we forgot what was real and true. But slowly we're making our way back out of shadow now. And I bring all that up because what that means is that as you're playing the game, and you're not mucking around you're not wandering around Earth. You're off in these really far more interesting surreal realms. But sometimes you get drawn back into shadow. Sometimes something will make you think about your life when you weren't a Vizsla, you were an accountant, and you were married and had kids and all that stuff. And even though all that was a lie, you start thinking about that. And even just thinking about it draws you back into shadow for a while. And so on a practical level, what that means is that if you've got 5 players and one of them can't show up that week and you don't even hear about it until 5 minutes before the game, because how many times does that happen to all of us, right? The GM just says, okay, Steve got pulled back into shadow. And, if he can make it next session, then he escapes shadow again and he's back, and it totally fits the narrative. It's a complete and utter explanation in the setting for why that happens, so that you don't have to do those things that game masters always do, right? Where you like, okay, well, Steve's character, he's there, but he's just kind of in the background. He's not really doing anything, or all the different little tricks that as game masters we've learned to do that, right? We have somebody else play Steve's character. We have Steve just suddenly disappear or whatever, right? Now there's an actual in-game explanation for it.
Which is freaking brilliant, because I know this has been the bane of DMs and GMs throughout time. Some of us are better at dealing with it than others. I've seen DMs are like, oh, everyone's not here, that we're not going to be playing the game.
Right.
And which really does kind of stink, because, it's that, like right now, one of the people we game with is an actual ER doctor, and he requests off that specific day of the month to game. And the idea that, to me, the idea that we don't game that day for some reason is horrendous. Like he literally blocked out that time. And everyone else is like looking forward throughout the week, month, however often you play. So that is nice where you can go, oh, well, we don't have to explain it. We don't have to hand wave it. Steve isn't sleeping in the corner or whatever.
Right.
All the goofy things we've done. It's just part of the game now.
Yeah, I tried to find as many things like that as I could that I see as the things that keep us from playing the game. And I tried to figure out ways around it, right? Like here's another one, right? Like Steve's character, suddenly does something and takes a whole bunch of damage and dies right there 1 hour into the session. And so like the game master said, well, either the game master fudges things because Steve's just going to have to sit there for the rest of the game with nothing to do, or Steve just sits there with nothing to do, or, you know, whatever. Right. And it changes that perspective, that changes that situation. So, in Invisible Sun, which Invisible Sun's actually a pretty deadly game. If you get involved in combat, its characters are fragile, but because it's a game of magic and surrealism, right? You can come back almost immediately as a ghost, and ghosts have special abilities. You can use some of your capabilities that you had while you were alive, but you also have special capabilities, some of which are obvious, right? Ghosts can walk through walls. Ghosts can, you know, do all these things, and so it's like your character goes through a transformation rather than things just ending. And in fact, this is such an assumed part of the game that there are special skills that you can do. There are special ways that you can advance as a ghost. So that like if Steve's character dies and is a ghost for 2 sessions, but then they find a way to bring him back to life, but then 4 sessions later, Steve's character dies again, his ghost sort of still has some of the skills and abilities that he learned from when he was a ghost before. So he's a better, more capable ghost the second time. And that's just an assumed part of the game. And it's fun, actually.
I have not actually LARPed, but I've heard of LARPs doing something very similar to that.
Yeah, you know, at Gen Con they have this thing called True Dungeon. Have you heard of True Dungeon?
I have. I have not partaken of it yet, though.
They have a fun thing where if you die, you still get to go around with all your friends, but you can't talk unless somebody casts Speak with Dead, and then you can talk to them. But, you know, you still kind of participate a little bit. And anyway, I mean, you know, a lot of different ways I think have a lot of different things have come up with ways around this. Even in 3rd edition D&D, Sean Reynolds and I wrote a D&D supplement called Ghost Walk, which kind of had this same premise that characters can keep on acting. I think it's an interesting thing because, like, you can set it up so that death still stings, right? That you know you want to avoid it, but it doesn't mean the fun is over, right? It's such an on-off toggle, right? It's like, okay, I'm having fun, I'm playing the game. Oh, now it's over. And I wanted there to be a way to mitigate that, and she could still be playing the game and have fun. And to be really clear, I mean, there are things that can happen. I mean, there's still the threat of permanent destruction. It's not a game where, you know, you can't lose, I guess. But it's a lot more severe than just death. Because again, it's a game of magic and surrealness, right? So now we're talking about destruction of the soul and things like that.
So Keith Baker had put out a game, Phoenix Dawn Command. I have not actually had a chance to play it yet, but we talked to him about it. And it's funny how designers are thinking about this stuff now, because his own game it's not the same mechanic, or I don't even want to say it's similar, but like the game goes on beyond death. And that's the same concept here. Like the game goes on beyond death. It's not an absolute. And finally, you know, game designers are kind of taking a look back and go, well, what are we playing? We're playing a game. And what is the purpose of that game? Is to have fun. Well, it's not really fun to sit around and watch your buddies play the game.
Right, exactly. So, and the fun thing about that is when you build that right into the game and the game's got a set, then you can build that into the setting too. And so there in Invisible Sun, there's this place called the Pale, which is where you go when you die. But because it's a place, right, I should say you go there if you die, if you don't remain as a ghost. But because we're talking about death and death not being permanent and whatnot, it's a place that you can go. So you can actually go and visit. It's difficult but you can go and visit like your dead friend or your dead grandpa and ask him that question that you always wanted to ask him or whatever it is. And you can work that right into the setting. And so, this idea, like nobody thinks in the world of Invisible Sun, in the setting, no one thinks of death the way we do in our world, right? It isn't an on-off toggle. It's like a travel
extension. Because Invisible Sun, it's multiple worlds, right? There's a lot of different realms.
Yes. Each one of them is referred to as a sun. There are 9 of them. So they're all sort of like different realms, different planes of existence, but each one of them is sort of identified by the sun that shines down on them. And Invisible Sun, the name of the game, is based on that's where magic actually comes from, is the 9th sun, the Invisible Sun. But there's a pale sun, which is the land of the dead. There's the red sun, which represents sort of destruction, and that's where like demons live, and it's full of chaos and whatever. Most of the action starts out in the indigo sun, which is where the city where the characters start in. But there's also a green sun, a blue sun. There's 9 of them.
So is there the shadow? Is that like the idea that the shadow is the real world, like our world, like your regular people, and people from the world of Invisible Sun, they're aware that that's not the real world, but this is the real world, and everyone's kind of living in the shadow. It's almost like being caught in the Matrix is kind of how
it is a little bit like the Matrix. And so there's a whole aspect to it. Cause like I said, like a long time ago, a bunch of people fled to hide in shadow. And then because shadow, it's not just an illusion, but it's a powerful magical lie. And it kind of twists your mind and makes you think that it's real. So there's still people trapped in shadow. And, it's one of the things actually the player characters could participate in, is helping other people escape shadow and come into the real world and remember what's real. But kind of like in the Matrix, there's also people in shadow that aren't real people, right? They're just part of the illusion.
Yeah, that's great. I almost feel like the Invisible Sun game itself is almost like an allegory for real life.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was thinking along some of those lines. There's things that are sort of true to me. But really what it for me, and this is like high level RPG theory, right? But like games are about escape, right? They're about, just you take a couple of hours and you get to be somebody else, living in somewhere else, doing something different. And Invisible Sun actually kind of takes that and makes that literal, right? Your characters literally are leaving the real world and going to somewhere far more interesting, doing far more interesting things. So yeah, that escape has always been a big theme in Invisible Sun.
Excellent. So we know there's a card component to the game, and there's actually a bunch of components to this game, hence the huge box it comes in. What dice are we using?
So it's got a somewhat unique die mechanic. It uses only 10-sided dice, but the dice are numbered 0 to 9, and basically task resolution is that the game master decides what the difficulty is, and ostensibly, to start with, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're rolling a die, you're maybe adding 1 or 2, and you're seeing if you succeed. But where it gets much more interesting is, first of all, the range of success actually can go much, much higher than just 10. So sometimes you got to get a lot of bonuses and whatnot to even possibly succeed. And so you cast more powerful spells or whatever. But where I think things get really interesting is that when you use magic, you start to roll more dice. So if you're casting a spell on somebody, that spell might give you an extra die to roll. And now you're rolling 2 dice to see if you get a success or not. Or if it's a really powerful spell, you might get 2 extra dice and you're rolling. Or if even if you're doing some mundane action, you can use some of your inherent power to add additional dice, right? Even if you're just like climbing up the side of a building, you say, I'm going to use sortilege, and you get an extra die to roll. And where that gets still more interesting, I think, beyond that is that if you're working against magic, if the challenge that you're going up against is magical, then multiple successes are required. And the reason that I like that is that that means that in order to deal with magic, you've got to use magic, because the only way to get extra dice in the game is through magic. And so if you need 2 successes, you got to be rolling at least 2 dice, or it's just utterly impossible. So you got some magical lock, even if you're the greatest lock pick in the world. If it's a magical lock, unless you've got some magic on your side, you're out of luck. And so that is very apropos for Invisible Sun, which is a game all about magic. Everybody in the game is some kind of magic user, basically. Now, then that doesn't mean that everybody is like a D&D wizard, because it comes in a lot of different flavors. But you're using magic in some way or another.
Maybe kind of like a little bit like Mage of the Ascension.
A little bit.
Where you had many different schools of magic, and it looked different when it was interacted with.
Yeah.
So, okay, MCCG, right? It was, Numenera, The Strange, No Thank You Evil, Worlds of Cypher, Cypher System. They all kind of use the same mechanics. So are we getting away from that into something completely new now?
Yeah, it is different. So people who like the Cypher System will find that there's still some similarities, right? Because, they're designed by the same guy. So not a big surprise that there's going to be some similarities. Like, you're still, if you're playing the game as a character, you've still got a lot of control over your actions and, like, whether you're going to spend points on something or not, depending on if it's important to you or not. And the other big similarity between this and Cypher System is that you build your character constructing a sentence. So, your character's got a number of different components to it. And when you're done, you end up knowing that you are, a bizarre gallant of the Order of Makers who eats human flesh, or whatever the crazy thing is, right? In the same way, in the Cypher System, you're a strong glaive who masters weaponry or whatever.
When you decide to go down that road and come up with that, now, I don't actually know which came first, because that's similar. In some ways, that's similar to Fate, because they use the kind of similar construction. Were you inspired from that kind of game?
A little bit. I was, where the inspiration really comes from, and this is actually true of Invisible Sun too. I do a lot of fiction writing, and a lot of that comes from fiction writing. When you're doing fiction writing, you often do what is called a character sketch, and you sort of come up with all these attributes. And if there's all these books on writing that talk about different attributes you can give your character to make them interesting and unique and whatnot. And I wanted to apply that to RPGs. But I wanted, if you said, well, my character is strong-willed, and this other character is intelligent, I wanted those things to mean something, right? And because that's what RPGs are all about, right? Is that we quantify things. It isn't just about description. It's about, well, okay, so but what does that mean in the terms of the game? And so that's kind of where that comes from. And Invisible Sun has a lot of the aspects of that too. A lot of aspects of fiction writing, like, for example, and I'm getting a little bit off the topic here, but I wanted to mention, one of the really core aspects of Invisible Sun is every character has one or more character arcs. And this is something that the player decides on, so the player decides, okay, I don't know what happened to my father. He disappeared when I was young, and I would like to find him. And that's my character arc, at least for right now. And so what the game does is that it kind of formalizes that. And so there's a character arc you can choose called Mysterious Background, and it gives you all sort of the steps for progressing through that arc until you get to the climax of that arc, which is probably you find your father or you don't or whatever, because there's a success or fail option there. But because this is all sort of formalized out, you know the steps you need to go through. It's like, rather than waiting for the game master to say, okay, here's the adventure you're going to go on, when you pick a character arc, you're saying, okay, this is the adventure that I'm going on, in a very basic sort of way. And the game master then sort of helps fill in, but knows where you're going, because he can look at the arc too, right? And he sees the steps and, oh, you're going to have to go do some investigative work. You're going to have to go and talk to someone. You're going to, all these things are laid out right there. And so it's sort of like the players provide their own hooks, I guess, to use terms from another game.
And how does that play out at the table when you've got like 4 or 5 people with their own arcs like that? Or is this where the app comes in and the idea that we're going to do stuff away from the table?
So it combines both of those things, right? So like I might start out, for example, let's say that I've got the Mysterious Background arc. I'm looking for my father. Some of that might start out as some stuff that I do one-on-one with the game master, right? I would tell him via the app, or, just a text message, or we just sit down for 5 minutes and I say, okay, I'm going to go, ask person X and person Y, about this thing that happened when my dad disappeared. And then we play through that quick interchange. I get some information, right? And then the next step is I go talk to someone else. They give me a clue, right? Eventually I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I found out that my father is held prisoner in this extra dimensional fortress guarded by demons. I can't do that by myself, right? I want to get in there. I can't do it alone. Oh, but what do you know? I've got this group of friends who are all powerful spellcasters. I'll talk to them, and maybe we can all go take it. So it becomes a thing where character arcs often start out as an individual thing and then become a group thing. There's also other ways. I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but there are arcs that allow you to sort of join into someone else's arc. There are ways to kind of thread it all through, but basically that's how it works.
Okay, and I understand too. Like I'm getting like a small snapshot, but I'm just thinking of things, as we talk, that I would think of as the game master. Well, how is this going to play out? Once we start mixing that in times X. Yeah,
right.
So Invisible Sun, does the GM roll dice?
No.
Okay, we've kept that.
Yep. Yep. Just like in the Cypher System, you do something, you roll, as a player, you roll the dice. Somebody tries to do something to you, you roll dice to resist it. It's just a mechanic I love.
Yeah, it seems like I'm not sure where I fall on that one yet, because I've played in Cypher System, but I have not run it yet. But I find that some people just hate the idea of not being able to play with the dice. And other people, I've heard other people, though, they love the idea of whatever happens to the players now is not their fault. It kind of, they feel like they're absolved of any wrongdoing because they didn't touch the dice.
Right. Well, and the game master's not fudging the dice rolls if he's not making any, right? In Invisible Sun, though, I mentioned the Sooth deck. Only the game master plays cards. So the game master's got some fun stuff to play around with as well.
Well, and even in Cypher System, I mean, you're still creating the narrative. You're setting the difficulties.
Oh, sure, for sure. Oh, it's not like the game master doesn't have anything to do. No.
Now he just has to get the pizza for the group. That's all he's got to have. No, it's interesting. It's another way of doing it. So, how long have you guys been developing Invisible Sun now?
Well, in earnest, I mean, like when with the idea that I really haven't been working on hardly anything else, probably about a year and a half or so. But even before that, I've been working on it for at least another year, sort of alongside other stuff that I was working on, like some, Numenera stuff and everything. So if I was going to compact it all, I would say it's probably about 2 years of my time.
Oh, awesome. Now I remember the question I actually wanted to ask. Group dynamic for Invisible Sun, how does that work? Did you put a lot of thought into that? Like, okay, well, there's going to be a group of people playing this game together. How does that work?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay, so one of the core precepts or concepts to maybe like a Dungeons and Dragons game or even a superheroes game is the team, right?
Right.
The adventuring party.
Right. So in Invisible Sun, there are a lot of character differentiation and a lot of roles, but unlike some games, there's no role that is required. Like, some people think that if you play D&D, somebody's got to be a cleric, right? And I actually don't agree with that, but that's a whole nother discussion for another time, right? But there isn't anything like that in Invisible Sun. The characters are all fairly self-sufficient, but yet work much, much better as a group. I kind of had to make it that way because of the side scenes and the development mode part where you might go off and do something on your own, even though those are meant to be really small, kind of not really heavily mechanical side scenes. Nevertheless, I had to make it so that a character, you're not afraid. You're not like, my character, I can't go off and do anything by myself because I'm too weak or I'm terrible at this kind of thing. Everyone's okay at everything, and some people really excel at other things. And so it's when the group comes together that group dynamic really works out really well. You've got, people kind of with different strengths and whatnot. Like I said, there's a lot of different flavors of magic in this world, right? So you might have a character who is a maker who uses their magic to make magic items and maybe give them to other people, maybe use them themselves. There's another kind that's really good at casting spells called the Vance. There's the Goetic, who is a summoning caster who uses their magic to like summon up angels and demons and things like that to help the group. So there's a lot of different roles that I think blend together. I hope blend together nicely.
Let me take another crack at this because I'm not really talking about roles because I actually feel the same way you do. I actually we were doing a live chat and I kind of got into an argument with my partner on this because I think roles are the stupidest thing, and the idea of other people telling other people what to do drives me nuts. But okay, like Firefly makes sense. You have a group of people, they need to work together to make something happen. Sometimes mercenary teams are the same way. A starship needs X amount of people to crew it. The superhero team is kind of like an iconic thing where they come together and work together, but they wouldn't necessarily need to. And the adventuring party to me, even though it is a trope and it's a blast, it feels kind of artificial.
So in Invisible Sun, the idea is, so one of the things that we have kind of baked right into the game is that when you sit down to make your character, you have a bond with at least one other character in the group, and maybe more. And that bond can be, oh, this person's my best friend, this person's a relative. There's a whole bunch of different ones. It might be that we share some mystic connection. We come from the same school of magic, and we have the same mentor. Anyway, so you've got what ends up being is you've got like 4 or 5 people, each one of them bonded to at least one other person, but not always the same person. So you kind of end up with this web of connections. And so the idea is that, it's a dangerous and weird world, and you're often going to need help, again, because remember, the players are the ones that are sort of initiating the action with their character arcs. You're always going to, at some point in that character arc, you're going to need help from the other players. And so that's when sort of the group works together and comes in. And, you know, in play, in practice, what you end up doing is different people become sort of the initiator. Like, you know, to use the example I was using before, right? Like, I need help getting into this extra-dimensional prison that's guarded by demons. So I'm the initiator. I'm saying to my friends, I can't do this by myself. I need your help. And then we go through that scenario. But then after that, or maybe even as a part of that, you say, well, okay, I'm going to help you get your father out and we'll see what we can do because we're good friends. But then in return, you know, I need help going to this other place and, you know, finding this mystical orb that will have the answer to the thing that I'm looking for. And so that becomes the undertaking that we have after this one. And it just kind of rolls along like that with everyone having different goals that require the rest of the group. So it's not so much, you know, it's very much like in a book or a movie where you get to a point where you need help and you call upon the people who are close to you, I guess.
It makes sense. And that's actually how I was thinking about it in my mind, is like, well, in most books, generally it's about one or two characters, right? Not always, but generally it is. And even if you look at a really overarching story where things kind of intertwine, like Game of Thrones, like if you read through the books, like each chapter is about a specific character. So role-playing games are a little bit of a weird animal in the sense of the way we come together and share the story, because narratives aren't generally written that way. So that's why I was just curious, because you've put so much thought into other areas of the game. Not that you haven't put thought into this one, like obviously the bonds pulls people together.
Right. And so again, this is kind of like where that narrative arc comes in, because my intention anyway is that it is like that, right? Where you go off and you have these side scenes that are just you, right? And you kind of go follow the thing, and then but other people are doing that at the same time. So it's like reading that book where, okay, chapter 3 is all about this character, but chapter 4 is all about that character. But then you finally get to, you know, chapter 7 where all the characters come together. That's the game session, right? So because now you've got everybody sitting there at the table. And those are some of my favorite kind of books, right? Where you've got the characters, you've got a number of sort of main point of view characters. They go off and do their own thing, and then they come together. And you know that when they come together, that's when the really interesting stuff happens.
Right, right? The big climax.
And then they go off.
Scenes.
Right.
Absolutely. So I've had you on here for a while, and I don't want to take up your whole day. I know you're really busy. So what are some final thoughts? You know, the elevator pitch for someone who's just, you know, learning about Invisible Sun.
You know, it's always so hard to do because there's a lot of different ways for me to approach that, right? And some of the stuff that we've been talking about, like, you know, this is a game where I've tried to take a lot of the different aspects that I see missing from some RPGs and bring them all together and kind of solve some of those meta RPG issues and present it all in a big, beautiful black box. But another elevator pitch might be just simply, you know, this is a game of magic and surrealism. And, you know, if you've ever played a game with magic, but you felt like it wasn't really very magical, it became very mechanical, this is a game that tries very much to make magic be weird and wonderful and unpredictable and strange and magical. And, you know, I suppose on another completely different level, I could pitch this as a game that sort of looks at life as a metaphor, the whole escapism aspect of it. And, I could go down deep into the philosophy of surrealism and talk about how that applies to magic and the melding of the real and the unreal and go off on that tangent too. So there's a lot of different elevator pitches that I could give, but mostly I just think it's a really fun game, and we're having a great time with it, and I'm anxious for people to give it a try and see what they think.
I'm definitely interested in checking it. I know one of my partners, Nate, is really chomping at the bit to dig into this. We backed the Kickstarter. We've got 3 games coming, so we're going to keep one 2 away to the fans, which is really cool. Are you going to be at Gen Con? I know Shauna is supposed to be there.
Yep, I'm going to be there.
And this video is going to go up just before Gen Con. Actually, we're supposed to be streaming the event, one of the events she's in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the Open Legend Every Die Roll Matters event.
Nice. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, so it should be a lot of fun. I want to thank you for your time, sir. And until next time, guys, stay nerdy.